Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 New Jersey International Film Festival Filmmaker Q&A session. We'll be holding a number of these over the course of the next few weeks, and as a way to promote our upcoming 29th annual New Jersey International Film Festival, which will be taking place between May 31st and June 15th. All of the screenings will be taking place on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and they will be available online, as well as we will have in-person shows for just about all of the films that we are showing. We selected just about 35 films out of over 700 that we received worldwide. So the films that we are showing are the creme de la creme, and we're very proud to be able to present them to our New Jersey audiences as well as to our audiences worldwide. During the pandemic, we developed a new audience, so we did not want to pull the rug out from under them, since we have one very nice person who watches everything that we show from Oklahoma, and we have a number of other people that buy passes from other parts of the world. So we wanted to keep them as part of our patronage, and we're very grateful to them. Today we have Peter Flynn, who's a professor at Emerson College in Massachusetts, and we're going to be screening his wonderful documentary, Film is Dead, Long Live Film, which is about film collectors. And here to help me ask him questions is Morgan Kalmbach, who is one of the festival judges, and she was part of the jury for this film. And so she's going to help me pepper Peter with a bunch of questions about his movie. Long Live Film is Dead, Long Live Film is our festival opener, and it will be taking place on Friday, May 31st. The in-person screening is at 7 p.m. in Voorhees Hall, room 105, which is located on the Rutgers University campus in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And again, that's at 7 p.m. Peter will be there to do a Q&A, a live Q&A with the audience as well. But if you can't come and you're someplace far away, you can watch the film starting at 12 midnight on that day. And you start watching the film that day, you still have 24 hours to finish it. So if you start watching it at 11:45 p.m. on that Friday, you still have another 24 hours to finish it. All right, let's get asking those questions to Peter. Peter, I'm a film collector too. The New Jersey Media Arts Center, which is one of the sponsors of this film festival, I founded back in the early 90s. And we've been gobbling up 16 millimeter collections for the last 30 years. So I saw a little bit of myself in this film. And yet at the same time, I think we see quite a variety of different people that make these films. And I guess my first question to you is, why is it such a guy thing? I mean, why are the majority of the collectors men?
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Well, the the large majority of collectors are baby boomers. And when you think about it historically, the baby boomers are the first and really the only generation to be completely saturated by film. You had it in the home in the form of 8mm. You had it in the classroom in the form of 16mm. And of course, every neighborhood theater was running 35mm. And if you had the occasion to go into the big city, you could see a 70mm film. So film was everywhere, and I think I think that explains why that baby boom generation really embraced the idea of film in the home. And then you've got to look at in the 50s and 60s, film is expensive. So it limits itself to the middle class population for the most part, which are, of course, predominantly white. As to why it's a male thing, well, film in those post-war decades was big, it was heavy, it was oily, it was considered a male pursuit. And that idea really continues even to a large degree to this day, but it helps seed that primary generation of collectors.
Wonderful. Morgan, would you like to ask Peter a question?
Sure. In the film, there's a lot of archival footage, and it's really interesting. I was wondering how you went about finding the archival footage and deciding where you wanted to put them.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my goal all the way through this film was to pepper and interweave as much old film footage as possible, and when possible, to show it in the act of being projecting. So you get a sense of film not simply as a clean image on a screen, but as a piece of plastic moving through a projector. So it felt, since this was a documentary about film, we needed to see as much of that as possible. And also, frankly, as much of film that we don't consider as part of film history. So the 8mm Castle film condensations, or home movies, 16mm educational films from the classroom, to see as much of what we don't consider as being part of film history in this documentary. As to how I went about getting it, I got it from the collectors themselves. For the very most part, the prints you see, the clips you see in the film, came from the collectors themselves, and I think that was, for me, it was important to have it kind of organically flow from the interviewees, from the people themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's a magical film because not only do you get to meet some of these people and you understand the love that they have for the preservation angle. They wanted to preserve film history.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's one of the wonderful parts about your film, is that you give a sense of history about the formats. But can you tell us about the genesis of how this film was made? I mean, how did you decide, I'm going to make a film about
Right.
film collection?
Well, it came out of the last film I made. I'd finished in 2016. I released a film on the demise of analog film projection in movie theaters, and that was called The Dying of the Light. And that was a look at really what was being lost with the shift to digital, loss of the handling and the presentation of analog film. And I honestly felt that it told only half the story, that the other side of the equation was what was being saved and what was being passed on. So it was a natural outgrowth from that film. And also, a lot of collectors are projectionists, and a lot of projectionists are collectors. So I already had one foot in that world. So it seemed like a very natural follow-on film, that if The Dying of the Light was about what was being lost, then now let's look at somewhat more optimistically about what is being saved.
Yeah, it's a fascinating film. I mean, it
Thank
runs
you.
it runs about 102 minutes, and it went by so fast for me because, as I mentioned to you, I'm a collector as well, and my wife does want to consider me a hoarder somewhat. I think it's an organized hoarding. I
Yes.
know pretty much where everything is, and because our home is small and my basement is like the end of Citizen Kane. I mean, I think of it as a lot of stuff, but it's really about maintaining a sense of history. And
Right.
a lot of home movies were donated to me.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I'm starting to get a little bit of that whiff of vinegar syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? And you mentioned it in your film too.
Yes, and it's something that people didn't really fully become aware of until the 1990s. But vinegar syndrome is a symptom of the decay, the chemical breakdown of safety film, and safety film, non-flammable film, becomes the dominant format in the 1950s. So everything post 1952 is safety film. And then all of 16mm, which was designed for home use, and 8mm, also designed for home use, is also on this diacetate safety base. And over time, if not stored correctly, the chemicals will begin to break down, and the acid that's given off that has this distinct vinegar odor. So that smell of vinegar is the first indication that the films are breaking down, and eventually they'll begin to shrink. They'll lose their plasticity, and they can no longer be run through a projector. And it's contagious. So once one print gets infected, others will follow. So beginning in the 1990s, collectors and archives too became aware of the fact that films were being lost due to this, and not just one or two films, but entire collections. So since then, the struggle has been to save and preserve, and I think that was a kind of a key shift. If I had made this film 20 or 30 years earlier, it would be a film about collecting. It would be about the thrill of the hunt, right? The hunter-gatherer experience. now it's about, let's save this dwindling resource, this dwindling beautiful artifact. So it's a very different thing, and I think Vinegar Syndrome was key in that shift of people's consciousness about film.
Yeah, as soon as I smell it, they get isolated. I think
Yeah,
it's because you don't take them out and you don't let them air out. I'm thinking all those things
right.
play a
But
role.
and what's interesting, Al, is that the archives know no more than you or I about
Yeah.
this. That, you know, the science is still so new and so unexplored that we really can't pinpoint the exact cause or how to stave it off, other than putting these films in cold storage and cool temperatures. And then how long is that going to
Mhm.
stave off decay? We don't
Yeah.
quite know.
I think, yes, very good. Morgan, you get the next two questions since I hogged two in a row. Go for it.
Okay, towards the end of the film, we see the merging of film itself as something a little bit older with digital technology, such as the computer, to be the film. Um, and this relationship between like older film and like digital stuff can, in some instances, be seen as like a threat to film. I know in the film you did mention some threats like the tape, DVDs. I wanted to talk about your opinion on the relationship between like digital and older film.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, for me, it boils down to a case of the carrier, right? The medium. Is it this strip of plastic with images embedded in it, or is it this tape encased in plastic, or now is it this hard drive, right, with a bunch of ones and zeros on it? And is that what's important, or is it the images and the sounds that they represent? And ultimately, I think it has to be about the images and the sounds that are captured. So if those images and sounds migrate to another format, then they survive in some way, shape, or form. I think of ones and zeros in the digital media almost as an afterlife of film. You know, we shed our physical form and off we go into the cloud, quite literally in some
Yeah.
cases, right? And we exist in this spiritual plane of ones and zeros. And maybe that's a pretty good analogy for what's happening. But I think if we can save those images and sounds and perpetuate them, even in a different format, then they continue to live on. So ultimately, for me, that's what's important. Um, and I do like and I think all films should have contradictions, and they should have irreconcilable contradictions, because that's life.
Mm.
So I tried, and I wish I'd gotten more of it, to be honest, in that final act in the film. I wish I'd gotten more dissent over, no, if it goes to digital, it's gone. It's
Mm.
I hope that you get a sense of what is lost when you go to digital. You lose that tactile quality. You lose that relationship with the projector. You lose a sense of responsibility if it's not something you can hold and therefore take care of and put on a shelf. Um, then you lose that sense of ownership and a sense of responsibility, which you don't have with ones and zeros. So I hope that comes across. But in terms of in terms of what's most important, which is the fact that we have captured places and people who are long gone. And perhaps were it not for these images, no evidence that these people or places would ever have would exist, that they had ever inhabited this planet, that we still have them today, albeit in ones and zeros, is nonetheless what's most important.
I think the other thing that I wanted to add to your question, Morgan, is also the things that don't sell are forgotten and they are not reproduced digitally. So,
But
there's
this is,
all of these
yeah,
old films that are just never going to sell, that they are not even replicated digitally. And so they kind of are lost until a studio says, oh, shoot, there's this actor here that's now,
exactly,
in
yeah.
vogue. And then they bug the collectors for copies so that they can make, Blu-rays or
Right.
digitally made. So,
When we went to tape, we lost so much stuff because it simply didn't make the migration. Then when we went to DVD, the same thing happened. And now Blu-ray, the same thing is happening. And now with streaming, all these streaming services, even more titles get lost. And then it falls upon people like Al, for instance, who has this collection of films in his basement. If that wasn't there, those titles would be gone.
Very true. Go, Morgan.
One of the parts towards the end about Cinecon, I think it was really interesting. I really liked learning about that, and it felt like a really good part of like kind of unifying these themes of like how important film collection is. I was wondering, did you know that you wanted to shoot there, or was it like a time worked out perfectly? Or
Well, it's always a little of both, because you go in. The first image I shot for the film was the opening image. The opening image of these pieces of film and these pieces of equipment, the projectors and lights rotting in this forest. I knew that that was the starting point. So then you ask yourself, is my film a line or is it a circle? Am I coming back to where I started, or am I moving away from where I started? And I wanted it to be a line because it's a little more positive. So I wanted to get as far from that point as possible. And for me, it wasn't enough to get to the point of saving a piece of film and having it survive. It had to be shared with somebody. So the act of screening was, to me, the kind of natural ending point of the film. And Cinecon is just one of those. It's unique, or somewhat unique, in that it's a film festival um, created by film collectors, featuring the majority of films they screen are films that came from collectors or have some connection to collectors. So it's a film collectors convention that's now 50 plus years old. So to me, it seemed like that's the natural happy ever after, that these films see an audience and see the light of a projection room again. So that was, and then of course the organizer, Stan Taffel, is a film collector himself. So again, that seemed like a natural thing. I joke that Stan and Cinecon are a lot like Rick's Cafe American in Casablanca. Everybody goes to Cinecon, and so it just seemed like a natural natural point at which to bring all of these characters who we see separately in the film, and suddenly they converge here. I like that in documentaries, when you can take those things and suddenly they become organically tied together. And these collectors are very different, but they're involved in the same type of activity. So there's an awful lot of overlap. And Cinecon was just a way to tie a lot of things together.
So the process itself took how long? Since the last film was in 2016, when did you start working on Film is Dead, Long Live Film?
Shortly afterwards. So it's quite a long time, but you start shooting and you're never quite sure what you're doing or what your focus is on. So I was shooting and shooting and shooting without really a game plan. I was interviewing poster collectors. I was interviewing collectors of memorabilia, not really knowing where I was going to settle. And then kind of everything clicked once that decision was made to just focus on sale. It seems like an obvious decision in retrospect, but in the beginning, it wasn't, or at least things take a little while to penetrate my thick skull. So I spent a year or so just exploring without settling in, and then one of the first collectors I focused in on was Lou de Crescenzo, and Lou was in The Dying of the Light, so I'd known him. But we really became friends on this film, and he identified the key points of the film. Here was this collector, and older in age, looking at the end of a 50-year career of collecting film, and asking himself, what do I do with it now? Where do these physical artifacts go? But not just that, where does what's in my head go? My knowledge of all of this stuff and my love of this. How do I somehow pass this on? So he was doing these shows. He was running film in theaters. He was instructing a younger projectionist in how to take care of this material, and he was looking to archives to donate the films themselves and the equipment that he had amassed over the years. So in interviewing Lou, suddenly I realized that these are all the elements of the film. So Lou helped determine the themes of the film and the flow, and the idea of passing on.
And you dedicated the film to him because he kind of he's interspersed throughout your entire film. You
Yes,
return to him at various moments. So I
right.
thought, it was very sweet that you did that. And of course he passed
And he passed away afterwards.
afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, he was the alpha and the omega. He was the alpha in that
Yeah.
he begins the film, and he's the omega in that we see him viewing a film that he saved on the screen in LA at Cinecon. So yeah, he just seemed to be the natural full round
It's
of the
very
film.
touching. It's very touching.
And of course, at the end of the film, he's just a voice on the phone. He's already taken a step away, but the
Yeah.
person he helped train is carrying it on. So
Morgan, you
yeah,
get the
it
last
was
question.
very much the heart.
Sorry. Ooh.
The interviews within the film are done really, really nicely. I was wondering how you went about like the actual interview process. You said that you've known some of them from your prior films, but
Uh-huh.
as a filmmaker myself, one of the things I do struggle with is like interviewing people, knowing what to ask, like, and just overall connecting with them. So
Right.
I was wondering if you had like any tips or like how you personally went about it for this film, because I feel like we really do get like a really good sense of who these people are,
Thank you.
and they're done very well.
Yeah, thank you. The most difficult things about making film are the most difficult things about life. It's just about learning to share this planet with people who may or may not share your ideas. So it's that. So I um I don't know if it's necessarily a filmmaking lesson. It's just how do you relate to other people and make them feel at ease and make them feel comfortable, and I mean that was really the approach. I I I've great respect for what these people for the knowledge they have, and for their love. I share it to a great degree. So these were people I really wanted to get to know. And I was raised by my grandparents. And if you're raised by your grandparents, you're raised with older people telling you stories of the good old days.
Mm.
So that's a very natural thing for me to do, is to sit down and ask questions to somebody who's older than me
Mm.
about the good old days. Um, so a lot of that is just basic human common sense, sitting down with somebody and making them feel comfortable.
Mm.
Outside of that, I don't bring in a crew. It's just me.
Mm.
So I stumble in with a couple of bags and start unloading stuff and tripping over wires and cables. And they're sitting there looking at me thinking, who's this fool? And does he know what he's doing? And already they begin to empathize and sympathize with me.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, all that anxiety and intimidation that people may have with this idea of film and a big crew diminishes entirely. And they want to say, well, how can we help you? How can we, you know? So I think that's part of it too. Just not arriving with a big crew and just a small camera and a single light, and just an openness and a natural sense of warmth. This is not who I am as a person. This is just who I am as a filmmaker.
Mm.
And it's a beautiful thing about a camera. It opens doors, it brings you into people's lives, and it's a wonderful way to connect with people. And Morgan, I'm sure you know that already, right?
Mm.
Um, Outside of that, I think it's just common sense and a sense of just how to relate to people.
Wonderful. Well, it's time to share screen so I can show folks how to purchase tickets. So I'm going to do that right now. And I'm going to click on this button. And normally when folks are looking, they look for our website, which is njfilmfest.com. And this would be our homepage. By the way, this image in the background is the actual screening space, which is Voorhees Hall, which is located on Rutgers College Avenue campus in New Brunswick, New Jersey. It's about a block away from the New Brunswick train station. I always like this location because of its accessibility. There's lots of parking. And the space seats about 250 people, and it's got state-of-the-art projection, a decent sound system. It's still not 5.1. We're working on that. But normally everything would be here. But since the pandemic, we've partnered with Eventive. And so what normally you would do, you would click current events and it'll bounce you down. You could scroll down and it would come here. And you'll see this little holding space. And the key thing is to click the buy tickets, because this is just basic information. And once you click the buy tickets, it bounces you to our welcome page for our Bonafide website, which is partnered with Eventive, who does the streaming. So as a hybrid festival, you will be purchasing a ticket through Eventive, but that ticket is good for the in-person screening as well as the online screening. And so there are 5 buttons. The first one is for the schedule. And if you want just a very vanilla version with just text, this is for you, because you can just scroll down and see all the great films that we're showing. Each film program either has one feature film, or maybe a short and a feature, or a couple of shorts and a feature, or a series of shorts. In this case, on June 2nd, it's Shorts Program 1, for example. So you can check out the film festival that way. You can also go to menu, which will take you back to the welcome page, and you can click on the film guide, which gives you individual links to each one of the films. So as we work our way down, we have Film is Dead, Long Live Film. You click on that and you get the same image that's behind me. That's actually from Peter's film, and a basic blurb about the movie, and also how you can buy a ticket that way. You can also just go back to the menu, click on Welcome Again, and click on Tickets, and this is where you want to purchase your ticket. So everything is divided by subject. So documentary film is what we are talking about today. You would click on this picture and you would hit the pre-order button. You would have to register, which takes 30 seconds if you've never purchased a ticket for one of our shows. If you already have, then it's really easy. You just put in your credit card information and you're ready to go. Each screening is $15. And with the exception of a concert that we're going to be doing on the 15th, all the competition films are shown between May 31st and June 9th on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And that's 2 weekends of programming. And then we have a concert with Marissa Nadler on June 15th. If you are like me and you want to see everything, you absolutely want to buy a film pass, an all-access festival pass. It's $120. It's like half price, and it includes a ticket to the concert. So it's a really great deal. So I'm going to go back to the welcome page. Basic information about the festival is here, our sponsors, driving directions. You do need to register your car if you're going to park in one of the university lots. That also takes 20 seconds to do. Basic information about our staff is also on the welcome page, as well as at the bottom of the schedule page. So that's an overview of our festival website and how you can buy tickets. And now it's time to say thank you to Peter for spending the last half hour with Morgan and myself. It was a pleasure meeting you. And we look forward to seeing you at the screening on May 31st. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you too, Morgan.